Hey there everybody, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Best to Worst Albums. Today we are going to look at the discography of Sweden's Opeth. So as a little bit of a twist from our debut episode yesterday, going forward, I'm going to give you in my opinion, the worst album in the band's catalog and go all the way to the best, rather than start it off with the best and go to the worst, right? I listen to you guys. I think it's a good idea, so we'll do it that way. But the show is still going to be called Best to Worst, right? So for those of you who may or may not be aware, Opeth have been around for a number of years. They're from Sweden, started out as a very, very good death metal band with progressive tendencies, kind of morphed more into a progressive metal band that also still used death metal growls, and in recent years, the last couple of releases, they pretty much moved away from all the death metal influences and have become more of like a kind of 70s, a mix of 70s style hard rock and progressive rock, because band leader Michael Ackerfeld really is a big fan of music from the 60s and 70s, specifically prog and hard rock. So that's kind of the direction that the band is going, but they're always changing, so you never know. But for right now, that's kind of what they're doing. So what I've done, and this was a little harder than I thought, because I have a very strong affinity for all of the music of Opeth's career. I've been following them almost from the beginning, and I love them a lot. So, and many of these albums are very, very near and dear to me, and there's no weak albums here. So just because, one happens to show up at the bottom doesn't mean I don't like it. And again, you may differ in some of your opinions on these albums, and that's fine. But I think I'm pretty happy with the way I've kind of ranked these here. So let's get it started. So coming in at the bottom, okay, as far as worst, again, it's not a bad album, but I'm going to go with Orchid, their debut. A good album, a very raw album, very heavy album. Okay, this is, death metal through and through, but again, those little folky touches, little bits of prog have always been available and present in Opeth's music. And again, this is a very solid, very, very solid debut. But still, the band kind of, hasn't really completely found their way yet. So this is going to rank at the bottom of the pile for me today, but that's okay. It's still good. Coming in next, I'm going to go with My Arms, Your Hearse, the band's third album. A favorite of a lot of fans, and rightfully so, because there's some, really, really memorable tracks on here, like the Demon of the Fall, obviously, Epilogue, Madrigal, there's some really, really good tunes on here. But again, the band's still in its kind of infancy, still very raw. So that's going to kind of sit down there for me. Next up for me is an album, I think early on when I first started listening to Opeth, this ranked pretty high for me. But in recent years, obviously, they put out such, epic stuff that it's kind of got knocked down a bit. And this is their second album, Morning Rise. Very good album. There's some great tracks on here. Advent, of course. Nectar. To Bid You Farewell. The Night in the Silent Water. So really epic stuff, long tunes. But a very, very good album. All right, next up, I'm going to go with Deliverance. Heavy album. Much better production on some of these later albums. Very, very solid album. This came out as a kind of 1-2 punch with another album called Damnation. That's next up on my list. A lot of people like this a lot more than I do. There's some tracks on here that are just gorgeous. This is, these albums came out, back to back, and that was the heavy album. This was the light album. So this is all about, acoustic guitars and mellotrons and keyboards and clean vocals, and there's some lovely tunes on here. I think about half of this album I really, really love a lot, and the other half I like. So for me, that's why it kind of comes down a little bit lower, but still a very, very good album, and kind of foreshadowed some of the things they would do in the future. Next up for me is the Heritage album, which came out a couple years back. Really strong stuff. This kind of signaled, the end of the death metal stuff for them. But a very, very strong album. Next up, Pale Communion. Again, one of the more recent albums. Really good stuff on here. Both of these albums, I like quite a bit as the band moves into, more prog and hard rock avenues, leaving a lot of the metal behind. Next up for me, a death metal classic, Still Life. Complex, dark, menacing, awesome tunes on here. Love the album cover. Just love the whole ambiance of this record. But again, it's got like moments of like tranquil beauty. Lots of prog here as well. Some folk amid all the thundering progressive death metal. Great, great stuff. Next up for me, an album that probably will rank a little bit higher for other people. And I do love this a lot. And this probably for me was, you know, when it came out, this just like kind of blew everybody's minds, myself included. You know, Blackwater Park, an immense album. So many great tracks on here. The Leper Affinity, Bleak, Harvest, Drapery Falls, Funeral Portrait, title track, Patterns in the Ivy. I mean, you know, just classic, classic stuff. A monumental progressive death metal album. One of the best ever, in my opinion. All right, so we get into my top three. Some of these might change around a little bit on a regular basis, but I think I'm pretty happy with the way they lie here in this list. Ghost Reveries. What I love so much about Ghost Reveries, when it came out, again, this followed the Deliverance album and the Damnation album. This kind of was like the perfect marriage between the death metal and the more progressive and hard rock style that the band was kind of tinkering with at the time. So you've got some, and they would do it also, not only have specific songs for each style, but the band would kind of like mix it within each tune. So this album is just filled with just great songs that, you know, stylistically are kind of all over the map, but it all really, really works. And some just great tracks on here. You know, Ghost of Perdition, Baying of the Hounds, Beneath the Mire, what else? Hours of Wealth, The Grand Conjuration, Isolation Years, just fantastic songs. Michael Ackerfeld's great mix of death metal growls, and he was one of the best in the business at the time, and his clean vocals just mixed very, very well all throughout the album. Really, really great album. That I think was even bested a little bit on their next release, the mighty Watershed. And Watershed has actually been my favorite Opeth album for the last bunch of years until the one came out that kind of knocked it back. And again, this is another just great continuation of the themes we saw on this album. These two albums kind of are almost neck and neck. They're very, very similar to each other. Great tunes on here. Again, just fantastic use of both the death metal style and the kind of more melodic, progressive style, and with bits of folk and prog and all that kind of stuff. A really, really great album. So, my favorite Opeth album? The top album for me, I've listened to it so much since it came out. It's a fairly recent album. It's their most recent studio album, and I just love it. There's just so much great material on here. I'm going to go with Sorceress as my favorite Opeth album. It's got just prime, heavy 70s style hard rock. It's got great 70s style prog on there. There's a couple tunes. You hear a little Jethro Tull, you hear a little Deep Purple, you hear a little bit of the Beatles maybe, you know, and then it's got some really great driving hard rock. Great use of keyboards, heavy guitars, lots of cool solos, great vocals by Ackerfeld, and the arrangements are just awesome. You know, whether it's from a more heavier direction or a little lighter, more folky stuff and pop stuff, I think they kind of do it all on here. And, you know, while a lot of people probably really miss the death metal days from Opeth, and, you know, at first I really did as well, but I'm starting to really get used to the style of the last three albums. And honestly, I don't miss the death metal growls anymore, because I can always go back and listen to all those other albums where they did it so well. So for me, it's like this is where Opeth is now. This is the direction they've been moving in, and I'm fine with it. I'm along for the ride. So let's back up. So let's start from the top, go down to the bottom. So my favorite Opeth album is Sorceress, then Watershed, Ghost Reveries, Blackwater Park, Still Life, Pale Communion, Heritage, Damnation, Deliverance, Morning Rise, My Arms, Your Hearse, and Orchid. Okay, so that's in the order of how I like them. You know, your opinions may differ, and if you don't agree with mine, that's quite all right. You know, don't need to get all upset just because you like other albums better or whatever. That's just the way it is. But if you want, let us know your order of preference for the Opeth albums. Love to see it. So anyway, this is on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube often. Look for, and I'm hoping to get to it tomorrow, okay, if not over the weekend, top 10 songs from Thin Lizzy. That's coming up next. We've got a questions and answers show coming up this weekend also, and I might be able to squeeze in one more top 10 songs. I got a couple I'm brewing. I want to do a Whitesnake one, want to do a Kiss one. God, I got so many on that list, but we'll see what we can get to. Next week, I am away, business trip, so you're not going to see anything from me at all next week, and I'm away the week after that as well for a couple days, so content might be a little bit light over the next 2 weeks, but I'll try and squeeze it in when I can. So we'll see you then. All right, guys, take care. Bye.